2489 Pursuit of Balance. Miss Morgan, can you hear me? Saint sighed. The woman in front of her was not responding. She was strapped into a straitjacket, sitting in a wheelchair, and looking quietly into the barred window of her patient room with an absent expression on her pale face. The world outside the window was dark. It was already late into the night, far past the time Saint was supposed to get off work. Her schedule was in shambles, which was a point of intense frustration. However, she could not do anything about it. This particular patient gave a whole new meaning to the word VIP, so Saint had been assigned to her and ordered to get to the bottom of her condition with utmost haste. She had been spending a lot of time with this patient as of late, but things were not going well. That hurt her pride. Miss Morgan was a difficult puzzle. She was both unhinged and chillingly cunning at times, and worse than that, she was prone to violent episodes. Worst of all, though, was the fact that this seemingly delicate woman somehow managed to deliver eerily gruesome wounds to the orderlies each time they tried to restrain her. Several had already been hospitalized, some of them irreversibly maimed and crippled. Therefore, Miss Morgan was put in a straitjacket and regularly fed a cocktail of powerful neuroleptics, which curbed some of her violent behavior but made Saint's work much more difficult. After all, how was she supposed to have a conversation with a person who had been drugged out of their mind? It was almost as if the leadership of the hospital had no intention of helping this patient, and was perfectly content simply keeping her locked up. Letting out another sigh, Saint left a note in her journal and stood to leave. "I will see you tomorrow, then." She was almost to the door when Morgan suddenly spoke. It was the first sentence she had spoken today, making Saint stop. Something is different about you today." Saint lingered for a moment, then turned around. She did not say anything, studying her patient silently. Morgan studied her, as well. Why did it seem like her EUS had a scarlet glint to them? Naturally, it was impossible. Iris pigmentation was determined by the melanin saturation level and varied from brown or dark brown, which could appear black in certain lighting, to lighter shades like green, blue, and gray. In rare cases, such as albinism, melanin was entirely absent, which exposed blood vessels behind the iris and gave the eyes a pale reddish tint. However, there were no people with vibrant, vivid vermilion eyes. Saint frowned subtly. "I must have seen wrong." Morgan, meanwhile, smiled slowly. "You are real, aren't you? But how strange. I don't recognize you." "Well, no matter, since you arrived with that man, you must be one of his." She seemed to be delirious, talking nonsense. In fact, considering the amount of antipsychotic medications administered to this patient, it was a miracle that she was able to form coherent sentences at all. Morgan's smile did not seem like that of a person heavily dosed with tranquilizers, though. She chuckled. "Tell him to come see me." She looked at something behind Saint, then exhaled slowly. Then again, maybe I'll come see him myself. With THAT, she turned to look out the window with an absent expression once again. The brief moment of lucidity seemed to have come to an end. Saint remained silent for a few moments, then turned around and left the room. The padded steel door locked behind her with a loud click. Her condition seemed to have worsened. I must make them change her prescriptions at all costs. An unfamiliar nurse and a few orderlies were loitering in the corridor outside. She did not recognize any of them, which would have been strange on a usual day. There had been many new hires as of late, though, precisely because of the patient in the room behind her. Saint had not memorized their faces just yet. Still, the fact that they were new did not mean that there was an excuse for how poorly they were carrying out their duties. Saint frowned, then forced herself to speak. "Do you know what time it is? Why hasn't anyone helped the patient to bed yet? Were you planning to keep her in that wheelchair the entire night?" One of the orderlies looked down. "Sorry, doctor. We will strap her in right now." Shaking her head slightly, Saint left them behind. Her schedule was already a mess, but if there was one thing she could not compromise on, it was proper sleep. Sleep was a cornerstone of both physical and mental health, so Saint maintained a healthy sleep cycle meticulously. She had to clock out and return home swiftly. Soon enough, Saint left the hospital building, opened an umbrella, and headed to where her car was parked. She looked at the phone while walking to check the time and noticed a dozen missed calls from a certain number. Detective Sunless seemed not to have taken her warning seriously. Pursing her lips, Saint blocked his number and put her phone away, retrieving the car key instead. Approaching her car, she exhaled slowly and looked up. The hospital was situated on the outskirts of the city, in the prestigious northern suburbs. So, the view would have been quite picturesque on a normal day, Sadly, the world was veiled by rain, and the stars were obscured by the heavy mass of storm clouds. The only bright lights Saint could see were the spotlights on the immense dam towering above the city in the north. Behind it was one of the three great lakes of Mirage City. Due to the heavy rainfall, its levels had risen, so the floodgates of the recently renovated dam were open. Saint could hear the hum of falling water even from a distance. That water would feed the main lake, the Mirror Lake, and if that was not enough, the floodgates of the southern dam would be open as well to alleviate the pressure. That was how Mirage City, built around a system of 3 artificial lakes, avoided drowning during the storm season. It remained safe and sound by maintaining balance, releasing pressure when needed, and letting the water flow between the 3 lakes. All systems pursued balance above everything else, after all. That was their nature. A human mind was much the same. It needed balance to stay healthy. All disorders originated from instability and imbalance. Saint wondered what Miss Morgan's imbalance was. What was there that she, who had everything in the world at her fingertips, lacked? Or was that exactly the root of the problem? The fact that she had too much. Shaking her head, Saint raised the key to unlock her car. It was then that she sensed movement behind her, and suddenly, there was something sharp and thin wrapped around her neck. 2490 Heal thyself. I am being strangled. Saint found herself strangely calm despite the fact that someone had wrapped a garrote around her neck, as if situations like this were nothing new to her, familiar and trifling, rather. She noted the strangeness of her reaction and filed it away to be analyzed later, reasonably assessing that now was not the time for self-reflection. Her instincts kicked in, proving that countless hours of training had not been in vain. Before Saint could even register what was happening, her body moved on its own, and she just barely managed to insert her hand between the cold garrote and her neck before the sharp string drew taut. The rain obscured everything around, its rustle drowning all the sounds. Light was pouring out of the hospital's windows more than 100 meters away, but even if Saint screamed, no one would hear her, not that she could scream with all the pressure being put on her throat. The assailant pulled on the garrote, and Saint suddenly couldn't breathe anymore. The string bit into her fingers, threatening to sever them, and she felt blood flowing down her wrist. Despite the horror of the situation, Saint felt a pang of annoyance. The sleeve of her trench coat, the blouse beneath, washing out blood stains was going to be such a hassle. The trench coat might survive, considering its hydrophobic coating, but the fabric of the expensive blouse would be positively ruined. But then again, maybe she would not have to wash her clothes. Because she would be dead. Somebody is trying to kill me. But who? A violent robber? A deranged patient? An obsessive stalker? Anything and everything was possible. She could feel his mass behind her, pressing her into his heavy body and pulling on the garrote with monstrous strength. No matter how much time Saint had spent exercising and honing her body, she would never be able to overpower an opponent who was that much larger, that much heavier, and that much stronger on top of that. A hoarse, undignified noise escaped from her lips. Damnation! Leaning against the assailant to support her weight, Saint raised her leg, and slammed the sole of her boot against the door of her car. Newton's third law of motion: for every action, there was an equal and opposite reaction. Saint had unleashed a potent force upon the car, and was pushed in the opposite direction with equal force. The car did not move, obviously, but Saint and the man strangling her were thrown back. He collided with the next car in the row, denting it, and lost his balance. At the same time, Saint slammed the back of her head into his face. The pull on the garrote weakened for a split second, which allowed her to slip free. Saint rolled away while feverishly gulping air. She did not care about dirtying her clothes in the puddles anymore, all she cared about was being able to breathe once again. Steadying herself with one arm, she attempted to plan her next actions carefully. Everyone had a plan until they got kicked in the face. Someone's heavy boot collided with her cheekbone, sending Saint back to the ground. A moment later, a vicious kick landed on her ribs, throwing her into the side of the car. Ah, crap, hey, dimwit, can't you even handle a girl? Shut your mouth. I think she broke my nose, damn it. Saint heard the voices through her daze. There are 2 of them. She gritted her teeth, then used the car for support and slowly rose to her feet. One of the 2 dark figures looked at her with a hint of surprise. Look at that, she stood up. We got a tough one this time, huh? The second lowered his hand, revealing a bloodied face, and gestured to her angrily. Who cares? Get her. The first man grinned. Tough ones last longer. I like it. A second later, the blade of a sharp hunting knife glinted in his hand. Saint stared at the knife with a strange indifference. She had learned countless techniques on how to defend herself against an armed opponent. However, every instructor she had ever worked with told her the same thing. The best defense against a knife is to run away. Running away was the optimal solution. So, she did exactly that. Turning around, Saint dashed away. The ground was slippery, and her designer boots had heels. Nevertheless, her form and speed were quite impressive. By the time the two assailants reacted, she had already created a bit of distance between them and herself. They lunged in pursuit without wasting any time, though. Run, run, run. Saint wished she could have sprinted toward the hospital, but sadly, the assailants had barred that direction. So, she was running toward the road instead. Somehow, it felt wrong. Logically, Saint understood that running away from two larger, stronger, better armed enemies was the right thing to do, but something inside of her rebelled against that idea. She wanted to live, though, so she forced that inexplicable feeling down. By the time Saint reached the road, the assailants had practically caught up with her. She had hoped that there would be cars passing by, but sadly, the street was dark and empty. No, not quite. There was a car parked across the road, and the driver was outside, smoking as he hid the cigarette in his palm to shield it from the rain. Hope. Saint raised a hand, wishing to call out to the stranger. But the words froze on her lips. Perhaps it was because of his black gloves, or perhaps it was because of the glassy, eerie look in his eyes, but she instinctively knew that the man was not going to help her. On the contrary, he was one of the attackers. Their driver, perhaps. There are 3 of them. And she was surrounded. The smoking man noticed her by then. He frowned, tossed the cigarette away, and lunged across the road, leaving her nowhere to run. What do I do? Saint froze, feeling a little desperate. In the next moment, an old black car appeared out of the rain, sending the third assailant flying over its hood. His body struck the road with a dull thud and remained laying there, broken and motionless, while the car skidded to a stop. Its door opened, and someone whom Saint had never expected to see climbed out of it. It was the man whose number she had recently blocked, Detective Sunless. She stared at her former patient with wide eyes, feeling both relieved and confused to see him. And happy, as if him being there was the most natural thing in the world. Not quite a guardian angel. Wearing dark clothes and an even darker expression, her personal devil looked behind Saint and scowled. Hey, bastards, why are you bothering my therapist? Are you two degenerate lowlifes tired of living, or what? If you are, stop wasting everyone's time and come here. I'll kill you. He paused for a moment and winced. I mean, I'll arrest you. Yeah, that is what I will. No, you know what, I am not going to lie. I'll definitely kill you.